Thank you for coming this evening. Today is something new for Southwest writers because we have published two anthologies and taken those stories on the road to a degree. But the emphasis for the funding this year from New Mexico Arts was to take it on the road to the far-flung parts of the empire, from places outside of the main hub of Santa Fe and Albuquerque. So we have programs that we've done already in Alamogordo and in Roswell, and tonight we're hoping that we're reaching to the other parts of the state where folks don't normally get to come to our meetings. For example, Silver City and Grants County. That's a big plus for us. So the people who are reading today have been taken from the two anthologies that we've published, although their reading may not be from those books. If they wrote something that was really that met the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish, then it's been done later. I gave them permission to go ahead and read something new. So, with no further ado, I will turn it over to our first speaker, Joe Badal. Joe is an Army combat veteran from Vietnam and a suspense thriller novelist. That's a very short introduction, but that's the kind of introductions you're going to get today because we want to get to the real stuff. So, Joe, take it away with your opening.
Yeah, Jim asked me to read a little something from the foreword that I wrote for the anthology Holes in Our Hearts. And I thought what I'm going to read is just one paragraph, but I think what it does is basically summarize why I think people should write, especially people that have had events in their lives that they've either been reticent about sharing with other people or afraid to do that or whatever. So here goes. It is often difficult for those who have served and their family members to verbally relate memories and experiences to others, whether too personal, too poignant, or traumatic. These memories and experiences, more often than not, rest in the back rooms of their minds, never to be shared. This lack of sharing is tragic on two levels. First, those who never had the privilege of hearing these stories will never fully understand what it means to serve their country, through the military. And the people who have had the privilege of serving never have the opportunity to realize the catharsis of sharing their experiences. So you don't have to have served in the military to have events that have impacted your life for good or for bad. But I think writing is a fabulous way to express your emotions and let other people know how you feel. So anyway, Jim, thank you very much for allowing me to do that.
That's exactly what I wanted you to do, Joe. So the essence of tonight's presentations and the ones that we're taking on the road this year are to read short pieces, not an entire piece that we've written and published, but to then get into a discussion about how it was to think about what happened that may have been bad, how it was to write about it, and then now to take this step and to say it out loud to total strangers. It's not as easy as you think. And each of the readers that we have tonight are to be commended for bearing their souls and doing it in public in this new way. So with no further ado, let me introduce Paul Gonzalez, who's our first speaker. Paul is an Army combat veteran from Vietnam. He writes for therapy. He was a member of the VA Creative Writing Group in Albuquerque before he moved, and he's now joining us from Arizona. Paul, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. I'm going to read a poem that I wrote in Holes in My Heart. And I wrote this for my brother who passed away. He was a Navy CB in Da Nang, and he sprayed the Agent Orange. He succumbed at 41 years old to the effects of Agent Orange, and I have some friends in my unit who passed from the same thing. The title of this is A Hole in My Heart. There's a crushing pain in my chest, a piercing pain that denies me rest. I endure not for me, but for those who will never be. Young men and women who died and paid the ultimate price of war now stand at heaven's door. Their future is nevermore. The evidence of a soldier's presence is nothing but a slight residue absorbed in the vapor of time. My heart, that vital organ, pumps anguish over our loss. Each chamber fills with grief, for which there is no relief. My blood flows like lava from Earth's inner core, searing my spirit, knowing your physical presence is nevermore. When the bugle blows its final notes, toward heaven your spirit floats. I dare not question the hand of God, for in heaven you now trod. Your destiny was written from the start. Your absence will forever leave a hole in my heart.
Nicely done, Paul. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
When you thought about writing this, did you have something in mind, or did it flow? Did it just kind of come out of you, or did you sit down and have an outline?
It just came out of me. I thought of my brother, and as I do almost every day, and I saw the way he endured the disease and the effects. And my best friend in Vietnam, he too succumbed. And so I don't know. I feel I survived for some reason to this point. So I just sat down and just started expressing what my emotion was.
Do you write every day, Paul, or do you just write when it comes? When do you write when it's sort of you need to?
I don't write every day. I write when something sparks an interest in me and it touches me deeply. So I try to put my emotion into words.
Okay. Is it get easier the more you do it?
Oh, getting the right words and getting the right emotion, that's somewhat difficult at times.
Okay. All right. Any questions from anybody in the audience? Oh, that's right. Wait a minute. I forgot. We were going to put those in the chat, and then Brenda's going to do it later. My mistake. I'm 80 years old, and so doesn't all the stuff doesn't remember. Bryn knows. Okay. Speaking of that, Bryn, you're next. Bryn is an Air Force Vietnam combat veteran who writes about military families under stress. He is joining us tonight from North Carolina, but he spent most of the last, 30 years in Angel Fire.
That's right. Yeah.
Take it away, Bryn.
Okay, I'm going to read a little bit from what I put into the Holes in Our Heart in the anthology. It's a two-pager. I've cut it down to one, and it's called "My One Flight Over Saigon." That tells you pretty much where we are. It takes place right after the fall of Laos, the fall of Cambodia. I was a young first lieutenant co-pilot in an Air Force Boeing KC-135 Stratotanker, a flying gas station looking for customers to refuel in the air. The plane is basically an airliner, even looks like a 707, but it's crew of four. And key to this is the navigator is a former F-4 backseater, so he's flown combat. So on April 29th, 1975, we took off from Utapao, Royal Thai Navy Base
southern coast of Thailand, flew southeast. I'm not a navigator, I'm a pilot. Southeast, over the Gulf of Siam, around Cambodia and took up position over the Saigon. When we arrived on station in Saigon, the situation was crazy. And you've seen this on television where the helicopters are landing on top of the embassy and it's just absolute chaos. This is where I was. Okay. It was total chaos. To everybody's surprise, the government of South Vietnam was on the verge of collapsing and hordes of people surrounded the U.S. embassy clamoring to escape. I was working 3 different radios, all chattering nonstop, radio discipline totally disregarded. Various voices flooding my headset ranged from the total professional calm of the U.S. Navy controllers on ships scattered around the bay to the excited pigeon of escaping South Vietnamese pilots desperately trying to land on those ships. Helicopters stuffed full of Vietnamese on the verge of panic crowded the skies. Smoke rose from all over the city and the environments so high and dense we could smell it in the cockpit. It felt surreal. It was mesmerizing. But this was no movie, and as reality set in, so did the shock. We listened as people all over the city and the sea died. In contrast, where we were, the air was nice and smooth and free of conflicting aircraft. We were just high altitude spectators. So there we were, drilling holes in the sky, looking for fighters that needed gas. Sure enough, we found a pair of F-4s getting nervous about their fuel state. The Phantoms requested to join up on us and we topped them off. Routine work, tanker guys helping fighter guys. They too were dumbfounded by the chaos unfolding below. Nobody expected this, the total collapse of a country. Together we flew ovals over the South China Sea. In my co-pilot seat, I had a great view of the Phantom on my starboard wing, gently bobbing along in a loose 3-ship formation, all the while watching Saigon burn and listening to the disaster unfold below us. "We got a 3-ringer, shouted our nav. "Ground attack, ek, lock on. They've got us targeted." "What?" asked our aircraft commander, totally shocked. "On us?" "Yeah, damn it, 3 rings on my scope, anti-aircraft, radar guided, they're locked on, and they're loaded." We all looked at each other, stunned. This was not supposed to happen. We were flying a gas station, half full of thousands of gallons of JP4 with absolutely no ability to outrun or outclimb or outturn any type of radar-guided anti-aircraft munitions. Death was a certainty. If the North Vietnamese fired, the shoot-down and explosion of our aircraft would be epic. The aircraft commander radioed the F-4s about to lock on and ordered them away from us, the target. Instead, the fighter on my side rolled up on his wing and arced down to attack. As he rolled over, I caught a quick glimpse of 2 Maverick air-to-ground missiles attached underneath. Using their onboard radar, the fighter crew locked on the enemy radar. Now, the North Vietnamese commander had a choice to make. He could fire up his beam at us, but the fighter would respond with his own missile and destroy the Vietnamese crew. Standoff. Maybe. Meanwhile, in our airplane, nobody said anything. We were afraid to breathe. The sudden silence was eerie as we all grappled with what could happen. This was it. We were dead men flying. What felt like 2 lifetimes passed. Then the nav shouted again, "They've shut it down. The radar's down." Pandemonium erupted in our cockpit and we could finally exhale. We cheered the fighters' actions and welcomed them back up onto our formation. Grateful as hell, we topped off the Phantoms with every ounce of JP4 they could hold for the trip back to their base in Thailand. Then we turned and headed back to Utapao, still rattled about what had just happened over Saigon. We landed, like always, as if we hadn't just returned from a brush with certain death.
So, Bryn, why did you write that story?
Well, it bubbled in me. Well,
looking back, I came back from Vietnam a different guy. I was no longer the happy-go-lucky first lieutenant that I had gone over as, and I didn't know why. I just thought it was evolution. I thought I had all the shiny had worn off of me, and I was just turning into a grumpy old senior first lieutenant. And I found out again in retrospect, I had um, quick temper, and I wasn't very nice, and I couldn't sleep, and but I thought it was just normal. I just thought that's the way I was going to be, and because my dad was all those things too. So, um, and it I didn't think about much more than that until I started. When I was an Angel Fire, I started going over to a writers group in Taos, and all the writers were females writing for therapy because most of them had been raped or beaten, or just had some horrible experiences. And um, so I saw people writing for therapy. Then I ran into you and the guys at the National Wellness and Health Center there in Angel Fire, and I found out that other guys were using writing as a therapy. So I tried to write this. It took years to write it, and I didn't want to admit it. I find in my talks with therapists that they say that a lot of guys have a hard time um, coming to grips with all this. Military guys that retire, when they retire, they all of a sudden they have time on their hands, and all these things float to the surface, and it did for me.
And I'm proud of you, Bryn, for taking it on. And you used what you wrote to get help, correct?
That is correct. The VA stepped up big time. It's not the same VA it was when I was before I retired. It's much better now, much more responsive, and this helped me get help from the VA.
Bryn and folks, Apple TV has a 6-part series called Vietnam, the War That Changed the World. And it describes what you just talked about in the last segment. And if it doesn't trigger any bad thoughts, I would encourage people to watch it. I watched all 6 episodes and it was amazing.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
So we've just heard from 2 different people who were in the war, who talked about their war experiences in 2 completely different modes of writing. One, emotional poetry. The other, Bryn, is writing the facts, just the facts, ma'am. And but it's necessary, because when you're dealing with the VA and the bureaucracy and you're trying to get help, you need the facts, but you also need that emotion too. When you do your comprehensive examination with a psychiatrist for PTSD, you better not be holding back. That's not the time to be tough.
Yeah, this had the psychiatrist in tears.
Exactly. And I broke down when I did. I absolutely lost it when I did it. And so you have told that story, and it helped you get help. And that's the important message for guys like Stephen, he's joining us tonight. He joined us at the VA writing group last week for the first time, and we're encouraging him to tell his story and get help. All right, let me shift gears now to people who are dealing with family members or their memory of family members, and they're not dealing with the trauma itself. And I'm going to start with Lynn. Lynn is and I'm not going to say your name right, Lynn, so correct me. So Talis? It's close? We can't hear you. Unmute.
There we go.
Yes.
Yeah, Zotalis. It's the
Zotalis.
Mediterranean.
Ah.
All right, good. So Lynn is a family member. She's a poet and a creative nonfiction author, and she's joining us from Silver City tonight. And otherwise, she wouldn't have been in person at one of our meetings. That's the whole point of doing this by Zoom, was to get people in from out of town. Take it away, Lynn. Tell us what you're going to tell us.
Okay. The first I'm going to read, excuse me, an excerpt from a really dear friend's experience in Vietnam. So the year was 1969. Jeff, our best friend, fresh from the jungles of Vietnam, was trying to figure out what had just happened to his life. He reinforced firsthand in graphic detail the immorality and the horror of the war. Wounded so severely, Jeff was the only soldier in the amputee ward that lucked out and kept all of his limbs. Jeff related the saga this way. As we stepped into the woodline, my watch broke, falling off my wrist. In the second I bent down to pick it up and put it into my pocket, the machine gun fire ripped past me. Immediately 15 feet to my left, there was screaming. One of my guys was lying face down in about 18 inches of water. Stepping into the clearing, I was hit. Dropping down completely underwater for cover, I realized how badly I was hit when I heard air sucking through the holes in my body. Every time I tried to get to my man, they dropped the barrel down right at the surface, skipping bullets across to finish me off. I had to back away, leaving my man there, his head partially exposed, brain sticking out. He was dead. I was sure of it. The helicopter, a scout, came within view. They motioned me to go this one direction. I was kind of walking, getting up, stumbling up, down. Somehow I made it to where they could recover me. As we lifted up, I'm in the back, all by myself, looking up, looking around, observing a few of my guys, and everything goes bright red. Bright red. Blood. I passed out. And the next piece is a poem that I wrote, and it is in the form of a letter to my dad. My dad was a World War II vet. He was a Navy medic assigned to the Marines. I called it an argument for peace. 68 years later, your letter reliving the truly horrific details of war is invaluable, astonishing, and painful as it is to even fathom how you survived, I'll never know. Lying stone still throughout the black night, darkness pierced only by interminable fire. Pressing into the Guam beach, aptly named Crossfire Gulch, amidst countless mangled bodies, the slightest twitch could have added you to the number, bringing to your consciousness the horror. Through choking sobs, you blurted, body parts everywhere. Is this the gain? A modicum of closure, processing scars? You deserve every decoration, recognition, and more. Yes, others deserve to live. How unjust and unfair. Hell on earth. But I am so thankful, so grateful. You found your way home. You're muted now, Jim.
Very powerful. What
Oof.
was your dad alive when you wrote that?
Yes. In his 80s, he died in 2013. In his 80s, finally, he was going to the VA and going to a therapist, and this started coming out of him. And it was shattering. He dealt with his pain with alcohol, most, all the life that proceeded after the war experience. And it was a very difficult family life. But, when when you find out what is going on in someone's heart and soul, it is all you can do to say, well, grace and forgiveness, and yeah, he um, he was awarded 60% disability. He was wounded twice, pretty severely, and then as time went on, it was reduced to 10%. And so when all of this started opening up in his 80s, they gave him 100% disability, and he never saw the anything from it. He kept on going back and kept on having whatever meeting and whatever papers and hoops to jump through, and he died without having any recompense. And when my sister and I asked my mom, well, where are all the records? And we wanted to continue this journey. She said, I threw them away. And I understand, she had to deal with him all of his life. And it was just, all right, I'm done.
That's heartbreaking,
Isn't it?
but
It
it's
just, yeah.
but it's so complex to deal with people who have gone through trauma and then the family. That's the perspective you're bringing to this, is you're
Yeah.
telling his story because he didn't get the care that he needed.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's just the way it is sometimes. There have been other people who have written about that problem dealing with the VA. Sherry Burr is very, very upset about the way her brother was treated.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's nice. It's good that you're able to process this to a degree for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And writing has been so cathartic. This is kind of my salvation.
That's interesting that some people can take their stuff and write it, and other people can't write it, but they can speak it. For example, I was an interviewer for the Library of Congress's Veterans History Project for many years, and many years I would listen to people and we'd start out the conversation. I've never told a living soul what I'm going to tell you.
Yep.
And there's no written record. There's a record of the transcript. There's an audio. They couldn't write it, and they finally wanted to get it off their chest before they passed. These were all men who were at the end of their life, and they felt
Yeah.
better for it. And so the catharsis piece of that is important, whether you say it or write it. The VA uses a thing called exposure therapy, and either path is satisfactory. The point is get it out of you, and repeat. The more you repeat, the better usually it is to handle. Not always, but with care and with a caregiver helping you, you can find your path. Thank you very much, Lynn, for
You're
your
welcome.
contribution and joining us today from all the way in the southwest corner of the state.
My pleasure and honor, really.
Josh, I'm very proud to have here. He is an active duty Army National Guard member, the only one in both of our books that was still on active duty. And I've been reading his stuff since he was in high school. He's a poet and he's a student. And he's joining us tonight from Utah. Josh, take it away.
All right. Appreciate that, Jim. I was in the New Mexico National Guard when I wrote these, submitted it, got grandfathered into the book. I'm in Utah now. So I'll read two poems for you guys. The first one is called The Thief. I wrote this when I was deployed to Europe. Basically, there was a part of myself that I hadn't expressed in a while. And then when I went to check in on it, it had atrophied. It had kind of, it had deteriorated. So this is a reminder to myself to be true to myself. And also, when you are true to yourself, you inspire others to be true to themselves. So it's a compounding effect. So, The Thief. To my children, I must come clean. Your humble father was a thief. When people came into my store and asked what I had to show, I said, Sir or madam, friend or foe, I am a simple merchant. I have only what your eyes can see. Every bauble on display was polished bright so it would please, but I kept the best stuff in the cellar just for me. If I put my greatest treasures from the cellar on display, I was worried they would look at them, spit on them, and say, This is garbage, old and useless, dirty, cracked, and broken. I've seen better in 100 stores. How dare you call yourself a treasure? I'm ashamed to say I thought this way for many, many years, terrified that if I put my treasures in the light, they would break my little heart, so I was only ever proud of them at night or in the dark. But something awful happened to me just the other week. I went down to my depths with my key in my hand to open the vault, to stand there and covet, to bask in the glow of my lantern on gold, but imagine my horror when I opened the door and saw that my art had started to mold. What could I do? I rushed, I flew, I gathered my treasures in armfuls and bagfuls and started to run. I knocked all my counterfeits down to the floor and hung up my treasures so they could be healed by the sun as it entered my store. Then people came from all around to see the things that I had found. This is beautiful, magical, stunning, they said. You live in our town, you know what came next. All of the merchants went running to gather their treasure and set them to sunning. Now the little street in our humble town is full of nice things, the nicest around. And I went to the cellar and tore down the door and made it a table to put in my store. So go tell the neighbors and tell them to bring something dirty or cracked. I once was a thief, now I'm giving it back. So,
All right.
yeah, that was that. The second poem is called The Flood. Basically, I was invited to this event with a friend. I thought I was going to have a great time. Turned out I had a horrible time. So I wrote this poem, and it started off, leans into like death and rebirth, because I was depressed when I started writing it, but I like to have a little bit of optimism. So it ultimately turned into death and rebirth. So even though the night had died, there will be more nights. So The Flood. Treading water, slowly sinking, thinking how I came to drink this foul water I'm now drinking. Was it fear that sunk me to such depths? Was it lack of sense or intellect? Was I blind? Was I deaf? Am I drowning now in questions I was once too proud to ask? I wonder with my death breath how I wronged me as I slip beneath the waves to join my follies in our grave. But alas, my foot hits earth and thus am saved. With my head up thrust to heaven and my feet on tiptoes stepping, I, like a spider, like an old spider, like a hungry old spider moving slowly towards that final fly, concoct a pretty plan, for tonight I shall not die. I move in each direction, seeking elevation in this life-saving endeavor, never stopping, never stalling, and though some would send me sprawling into the abyss, there was one direction which by chance I did not miss. And as I tiptoed on this narrow path for hours with the little life I salvaged, I looked above and saw my life projected on the clouds. A young man with thoughts of the world, thoughts of himself and the world, committing bad blunders and mislabeling them good deeds. I walked the lands, a young man with much to do and much to see. An older man now I see in the clouds above my head while I'm drowning, neither diving nor rising as I attempt to dispel the mistakes that surround me. I move slowly with great purpose, testing left and right, but always forward, searching the surface. Hours pass, the sun is setting, mind and body getting heavy, getting ready for the fate that I have sent me. When suddenly my eyes, which seemed forever doomed to search the sky, affix upon a bright beach drawing nigh. I thrust myself upon the shore and shout, Surely heaven knows no finer floor. These tiny grains of life have saved me from the end. I will construct a house of them, and though it will slip into the sea, the world has returned to me, and I, at last, have peace. So that's
Very good, Josh. And I see, I don't know whether you noticed it, but your mother is there with Brenda.
Oh, is she? She's mom.
Hi, Lindy. Good. What do you think, Josh? Is this something every National Guard sergeant does in his spare time, write poetry?
No. I kind of stumbled on it. I said I had sort of a rough patch in my life before I joined the military, and I kind of just wrote, just on my own, didn't really have an audience. So then, I started getting more serious, and Dad, dragged me in. I went to a couple writers' meetings with him in Taos, and I'm studying English here in Utah, so I guess it stuck. So I just kind of came to it naturally, I guess, and just kept going.
What do they have you writing in your program in school? Is it poetry or prose or both?
Both. I did get published in my school newspaper thing. Um, and I got two short stories published in the school publication and two poems. Um, so yeah, I do poetry, and then I do like science fiction, fantasy kind of stuff. So
And you sent me a one of your science fiction things, which I believe I got Alan Herring to look at for you. Didn't he do that? Yeah. Have you guys seen each other ever? No.
no, no.
But the two of them have been exchanging ideas, and that's part of what the mission is for Southwest writers, helping other writers. We all do that. And Josh, I'm proud that you're taking up the mantle and you're doing something good. I look forward to reading more of your work in the future.
All right, appreciate you having me.
Rose, you're next. Rose Kern, a family member who will tell us about her grandfather in World War One.
Well, basically, even though I'm daughter and granddaughter to Army veterans, wife of Air Force, his dad was Navy, my son-in-law's Marine, and so are two of my nieces and a niece and a nephew. So I've got all these family that are in the military around me, but I've never been in the military. And they don't talk about it when they come back, especially from the heavier parts, or the ones that they've seen the bad things in. Most of them tend to, if they discuss it at all, they talk about the good things. But you get feelings about what happened to them little by the things that they wrote at one time or another. Grandpa Huser, he was in World War One, and he was basically, okay, I'm just going to start out here in my story. In the decade, and this is part of my writing thing, is I like to put myself into as much of the locations I can understand. Okay. In the decade from 1845 to 1855, there are more than 1 million citizens of Prussia, later called Germany, fled to the US to escape economic hardship and political unrest. Thousands went to farmable country in the Midwest. And Joseph Nicholas Huser, my grandfather, was third generation. The son and grandson of blacksmiths, he was born in the Midwest. And in June of 1914, however, Germany became the United States foe for the first time. Now, all of these people, and he still had cousins that they wrote to back in Germany at that time. And yet now he has to go to war against them. This was now the war to end all wars, and hundreds of people whose parents and grandparents had escaped persecution in Germany were faced with a situation where they had to take up arms, not just against a big political entity, but against their cousins and customs and their own heritage. The Husers were devout Catholics and avidly devoted to their adopted country. And when World War I was declared in 1914, 25-year-old Joe Huser was called up in the first draft. That's Joe. So what could I do to find out more about him? Well, one of the major things was his letters, digging them out of my mother's and grandmother's old scrapbooks that they had kept around during that time to find out the things that he would talk about. Originally, he was put into the infantry, and he wrote at one point after his basic training, they were sent across the sea in the winter time. And he was sent from Camp Meigs, Washington, to Halifax, Nova Scotia, where the ships had gathered to take them to Europe. In his memoir, he wrote, "We left Halifax at 43 degrees below zero. We then hit one of the worst storms in the Atlantic. In the mess hall at noon, dishes were sliding from one end of the table to the other. Glad I was to have the top bunk so that when the other fellas got sick, I was high and dry." They eventually landed in Liverpool and crossed England to Southampton, where they boarded the boat to France. Now, all of these things that I found out from him over time, the personal letters to family were the most telling. After his fiancée died while he was away in France, he got a letter from her sister. Dear Fanny, received your letter this noon and was more than glad to hear from you. I'm going to try to get explained how glad I am to get the letters, especially from you folks, as I miss Izzy's letters very much, and yours helped to fill a big open gap. Thank you for your offer to send me anything I want or need. I don't know of anything I need or would like more than to hear from you. I get that over and over. The most important things to him weren't telling about all of the bad things that were happening around him. They were getting those letters and touching the people that he loved that were back home, the reason for his really being there. Thanks for your offer to send me anything I want or need. Sometimes I get pretty lonesome, but then I look at a bunch of Kodak pictures I have, since it takes me right back to the old days. The other thing that kept him going was his deep religious faith. And he served as an altar assistant at a mass in Lourdes, France, at the Basilica, and got a small medal with a picture of Saint Bernadette, who he later gave to his daughter. At the time of his enlistment, he was 23 years of age, black hair and blue eyes. And 4 years later, when he returned from France, his hair had turned white. He came home to Indiana, opened a successful tool, and died, and had all of us kids and grandkids and more grandkids. Like many who serve, Joe's letters did not include complaints about fear, discomfort, or the horrors that he must have seen. The thing he wanted and needed most from his family is a simple communication, things he could touch, read, and words of normalcy, words that gave him hope of returning to a life that included warmth and joy. So as you can see, when I wrote the story for this and other anthologies, I went in to find out what was the situation, what was he facing, not just, I'm here and I'm going off to war and these are the personal things I see, but for him, from family background, the fact that he was actually going to war against people who he would never know, really, if he was shooting a cousin, because he had to go up against all the people that would have been living with him and if his family had never moved from Germany to the United States. So he had all of that to deal with. And then I had to look and see what was the history of it to get the feeling, to know him in order to write the story about him. What was important? What did he really want to have with him and how he was going to get through it? I think I mentioned to somebody once, at the time of his enlistment, he was 23 years of age with black hair and blue eyes. And 4 years later, when he returned from duty in France, his hair had turned completely white. You don't hear about what caused that, but it was there. Anyway.
Thanks, Rose. That's exactly what I wanted you to introduce to this session tonight was you can do research and you can find out lots of things about your relatives or people who were in the military. It takes work, and letters were the main source, right?
In this case.
As soon as you said, what would you need? I thought of, there was a woman who was in SouthWest Writers and Military Writers Society. I think her name was Kit, and she talked about her dad as not an airline pilot, as a bomber pilot in the Pacific. And he would write home and said, send ketchup, So it's a way, if we veterans and you family members don't tell the stories, then you're just going to cause somebody in 2 or 3 generations to have to research it all out. So leave some breadcrumbs for them. Leave a legacy for them to learn what you suffered while you were in the military or as a supporting family member or friend. It's a good thing to do. Let's go ahead and go to the last type of writing. And Joe Badal and I are going to do this to more or less degree, just to introduce the subject of using fiction. When you don't want to use your own life story and you want to tell the story, but you don't have a family member to do it, or you don't want to have a family member to do it, what's another way that you can get your story out? Joe, have you used this fictional approach?
Yeah, very quickly, I've always wanted to be a writer. And when I was 15 years old, my dad, when I told him that I wanted to study uh, creative writing in college, his response was, and I'll never forget this, uh, dummy, you have no life experiences to write about that anybody would want to read. And so I said, well, I could always write about living in a house with an emotionally abusive parent. And at that point, he wasn't very happy. So I, my second book actually was called Evil Deeds, and it was based on the kidnapping of our 2.5-year-old son in when I was stationed in Greece with the U.S. Army. And that was a very, very hard book to write. And uh, it didn't do much for me cathartically. It just made things worse. So I thought, I'm going to write stories, but I'm not going to write them about personal experiences, but I'm going to write about good versus evil, and that in itself has been cathartic. So what I thought I would do is read uh, a couple quick pages from my next book, Gone Forever. And Gone Forever is as in loved ones gone forever, but also innocence gone forever. And this is from the book by the same name, Gone Forever, which is the fifth in my Lassiter Martinez case file series, which is about two female detectives in Bernalillo County. And these ladies have issues of their personal issues of their own. And so this is chapter one. This is how the book starts. The images of the dead, the carnage, flashed like dry lightning before Detective Barbara Lassiter's eyes. She blinked and shook her head as though to clear her mind. Hell of a thing, she thought. A homicide detective who has a problem holding it together at the sight of dead bodies. You okay? Her partner Susan Martinez asked. Yeah. You want me to take the priest? Susan said as Barbara watched Father Michael Doherty through the open door of his office at the back of Holy Mother Church in Albuquerque's near Northeast Heights. The man's appearance had worsened since she and Susan had arrived at the crime scene. Between consoling parishioners and fielding questions from detectives, Father Michael seemed to have aged 10 years in a few hours. Now at 1 a.m., he looked as though he might collapse. No, I got it, Barbara said. We'll play it like we discussed. You go to Lucas Brennan's place. We still have someone at his apartment. There's a deputy outside the place. Are you afraid Brennan might rabbit on us? Barbara remembered their initial interview with Lucas Brennan here at the church. The young man had a deer in the headlights look, his eyes wide with shock. She had thought that if he had not been so distressed, he would have been uncommonly good looking. But grief and trauma had distorted his blue eyes and sensual mouth. No, Barbara said, I'm more worried about his mental state. He was as distraught as any person I've ever seen when we questioned him earlier. I was afraid he was going to lose it. I didn't have the heart to make him hang around here while we processed the scene. Susan said, I called a friend of mine at the grief services program at the office of the medical investigator and asked her to meet with Lucas. She told me she'll go see him later this afternoon. I'll go to Lucas's place as soon as I can. Barbara took a deep breath, let it out slowly, and moved to the priest's office. He half rose from his chair as she entered and offered him her hand. He took it with a brief, limp, damp grip, then dropped back into his desk chair. He slumped as though his backbone had turned to rubber. I need to go to the hospital to visit those who were injured. He swallowed hard, and the families of those who were murdered. His voice was high-pitched with a barely noticeable lilt of Ireland. My parishioners need me. Barbara, at 5 feet 9 inches tall, towered over the diminutive priest, who looked to be about 60 years old. His florid features were deeply lined, and what hair he had was sparse, white, and wispy. His black shirt was wrinkled, and his white collar appeared to be at least 2 sizes too large. Earlier, she noticed dark spots on his black shoes, which she guessed was blood. She wondered if he was aware of it as he tried to make eye contact with him, but his eyes ping-ponged everywhere except at her. Are you up to answering more questions? He finally looked at her and nodded. After placing her cell phone on the front edge of the man's desk, she told him she planned to record their conversation, which he agreed to. Then she recited the time, his and her names, and their location. She said, I apologize for keeping you here after what you've been through, but it's important that we get a clear and complete picture of what happened. You being at the front of the sanctuary gave you the best view of events. Barbara waited for Father Michael to respond. He lowered his gaze to the desktop and covered his face with his hands. Then he made a sound that was both groan and whimper. She prompted him again. Can you tell me when you first noticed the man with the machete? So I think that's what I wanted to read, Jim. I could go on, but I think that's enough probably.
Let's talk for a few minutes about why. Well, let me just talk about why I use fiction. I crashed an airplane. That's why I have PTSD. I've only told that story twice. Once at the VA to get the compensation and the C&P exam, with compensation and pension exam. I didn't make it through that story very well. I blubbered like a baby, but I got it out. The next time I talked about it, I was doing research for a book, and I was at the airport at Albuquerque, and there was a Navy plane that I wanted to write a fictional crash about. And these guys, the 3 pilots, were helping me, and we were talking about how it would work with that airplane to crash. And they asked me, well, tell me about yours. That was a dumb thing for me to answer, and I'll never do that again. I can't think about, let alone write about my trauma, but I can fictionalize it. I've written 3 aircraft crashes that are very good. Technically, they are exactly what would happen to that airplane in the situation that I put them in. And emotionally, it's me. And so it gets out one way or the other. But I can't read those portions. I can't read them out loud. One of our ladies who was on tonight earlier, and we'll probably have the recording later. I read a book to her. I read my entire book. She was my psychologist. And I got to the end and I couldn't read it. She had to read it out loud, and we just cried. So it's an alternate way to get your stuff out there if you're not ready to do like Bryn did and write a factual report. This is what happened to me. Or like Paul does and turn it into a poem. It's just another approach to take, and it does work. I don't write about my crash, but my psychologists and psychiatrists have all said I'm doing the right thing.